Hello everybody and welcome back to Music Ed Now. In today's video we're going to look at 6 super useful PowerPoint tips for teachers. 2 of the tips are to do with design and aesthetic of your PowerPoints, and the other 4 are to do with functionality. If you're new here, Music Ed Now is a place dedicated to sharing resources and tips with music teachers and teachers more broadly. So if you find this and other videos helpful, please consider hitting subscribe. So without further delay, let's hop into tip number 1, which is to do with using 3D models. So the first thing we're going to look at is how we go about creating this transition, which is a combination of using a 3D model of the guitar and a thing called a morph transition. So the first thing we're going to have a look at is the idea of 3D models in PowerPoint. So I've got this separate presentation with all of my 3D model ideas, and to begin with, what we're going to look at is how you go about inserting a 3D model for the first time. So I'll delete this and do it from scratch. Go to the Insert tab, come over to where it says 3D models, and in the drop down you can say this device or stock 3D models, and we'll open up stock for now. So this is what comes natively with the PowerPoint that you have. Then you can search for your models. I simply put in guitar, and the one down here is the one I chose. And then straight away you get this little icon in the middle that allows you to play around with the positioning of the guitar. What I love about 3D models is it makes for a more immersive and interesting looking PowerPoint. And what you'll find is after a while it might be limiting to just use the drag of your mouse. So if we come over to the format pane and come to this icon here, we can mess around with things like the model rotation. So if you want to be more precise, you can just tweak these. So if you want it to be more facing up or facing down, if you want the headstock to point towards you, you press up here, or if you want the body of the guitar to point towards you, we can actually do full rotation here, like that. So it's all on 360. It's important to have this checked, resize view to fit model, or else the crop is going to cut off part of the image. So let's say I want this guitar to look like it's flying through and lands on a title slide, just like we had in the opening. While it's selected, press Command and C or Control and C to copy it. Come to a second slide and press paste, and then I'm going to mess around with this. So I'm going to have a flip around like that, straighten it up a little bit, put it like that, and then I'm going to resize it and position it slightly off screen like this so that I have room for some text. The next thing I need to make sure is that in the transitions tab up here, my morph transition is selected, and hopefully with all this working you get this. So without the morph transition, it doesn't do that smooth flip around, but with the morph transition on slide 2, you'll get this flipping around motion. So I'm just going to show you some more 3D models and more morph transitions that you could try yourself. So let's say I want this robot to move across the other side of the screen. You can imagine I have a presentation here that has text on this side, and then all of a sudden the text is on the other side for different points. So if I duplicate the slide by pressing Control and D, and then I rotate this guy a little bit like that, and I move him across here. So switching between the 2 slides now, it just looks like our little robot is moving or flying across the screen with a little bit of a rotation. Again, this is a stock 3D model, but let's say we were trying to show something about the shortcuts on a computer. I have this little animation here, and then I'm going to zoom into the keyboard in the next slide. And then I can start to talk about keyboard shortcuts or whatever I want to do with this. And you'll see how crystal clear the 3D model is as well, no matter how big the zoom is. So what's happening here is I've gotten this 3D model, then you copy and paste this to over here. And what I did was I just rotated the computer around to here, and I zoomed out really big so that on the slide, what you're going to see is just the keyboard. Something very similar is happening here with the piano. So we start with a piano here. Again, I have space over here for maybe text to say what the presentation will be about. And then on the morph transition to the next slide, it zooms into the piano. And I think this will be helpful in the context of trying to teach students what the note names of the piano notes are, but having a big visual up on the screen so that if you have a class full of 25 people, they can all see what you're talking about. And again, just to show you the background of this, if I zoom out, I've literally blown up that 3D model as big as I could possibly get it to fill the slide with just an octave or so. of the piano keyboard. If you can't find what you're looking for in the stock 3D models in PowerPoint, there's an excellent website called Sketchfab, which has lots of freely downloadable 3D models for you to choose from. All you have to do is search in what you're looking for, and I've never not been able to find what I'm looking for, or some version of it in this search. There are some paid options, but for lots of them, you can freely download them. And with the morph transitions and 3D models out of the way, we're going to move on to some of the more functional things you can do in PowerPoint in the last 4 tips. This next tip is the most versatile tip in all of PowerPoint, in my opinion, and it's using action buttons. I'm going to demonstrate first what it's doing. When I hover over notes here, you'll see that my mouse becomes a little hand. That means I can click something. So I'm going to click this now, and that brings me to a new page. And that's being triggered by an action button. Similarly, if I hover over this home icon, this will actually bring me back to where I just was. So I'm going to escape now and come back into the editing view. And if we go to the notes text box and open up action, what we can see happening here is that it's linking to slide 3. So this is about navigation around your slideshow, sending people where you want with the touch of a button. In many ways, this emulates what you would see on an app. And sometimes this is how I think of my PowerPoint presentations. Maybe I want them to be more interactive and for students to be able to click through to parts that they need the most. So here's how it works. You select the item that you want to be able to trigger to somewhere else. You go to the Insert tab again, and you go to the Action button. And then we have a whole host of options. I'm going to stay on the mouse click one for now. The first most obvious thing to do is link it to different slides. The other things we can do though, if we open up this drop down menu, is you can have it go to the next slide no matter what. We can have it go to the previous slide. We can have it go to the first slide, that's the title slide. We can have it go to the very last slide. You can have it linked to a URL. You can have it open up another PowerPoint presentation or open up some other file on your computer. Or you can go to the slide one, which is what I've done here. And then once you say link to slide, you can choose whichever slide you want in your presentation if you know where you're going. How I'm making it do that zoom up animation and then going on to the next slide immediately is using transitions. So if you go into the transitions tab, you'll see that I've got that morph slide that we talked about before. So it morphs from this to this image. And because I've copy and pasted this notes text box over, it zooms into that slide. I'll play it again in a moment. And then the other thing to say is the duration is only half of a second. And then after, it automatically moves on after a quarter of a second. So if you have this after box ticked, it won't stay on the slide. It will automatically move on to what you want. So you get this very slick maneuver from this links to slide 3 and then moves on without you having to click anything else. And then we're into the body of what we want to happen here. And now that I'm here on this slide, I'm going to show you a little bit more of a complex use case for the action buttons that makes this slideshow really interactive. So what we have here is a picture of the guitar, and all of these little circles represent notes along the fretboard from the open strings all the way up to the 12th fret. If I pick any note, and there's 78 of them here, if I pick any note, so let's say fret 7, string 4, and press it, it plays the note sound of what that is. It also shows me where that happens on the treble clef save and also where it happens in tab. And then if I move away from that in any way, it goes back to the slide that we were just on. I can do this all around. If we come back into the edit mode again, we'll have a little look at what's going on. So each of these little circles has an action to it. So go to our Insert tab, and if we open up the action, we can see where it's going. So this says, for example, fret 1 on string 6, it says to link to slide 6. And not only that, but when we have it linked to slide 6, which is our note F, we also have this F1 guitar note playing at the same time. In the mouse over, I've got highlight when mouse over. So again, in our slideshow view, you'll see as I go around here, there's a little highlight box that goes around each circle. And this again just further shows the user or students of this PowerPoint that they can click on these notes. The second part of this is another complex use case for action buttons, but if I press that note now, you'll see that it makes a sound and it comes up with the note F. But as soon as I move my mouse anywhere other than that, on this slide, it goes back. What I have is this white border that's around all of the slides, but what I've also done is put an action on this rectangle that when the mouse hovers over any portion of that rectangle, it will link to the last slide viewed. So here I am, I'll just talk it through now. So if I press fret 3, string 5, it makes a sound, it goes to that slide that has the correct information. And now I'm not touching my mouse, but as soon as I hover my mouse anywhere on this screen, it's going to revert back because its mouse over is going to trigger the action. And we're back. So that's a really useful way of using it to create some interactive clicking on a slideshow. Again, emulating like what a guitar app might be. I'm just adding the finishing touches to this slideshow, but when it's complete, I'll be doing a fully featured video on just the Learn the Guitar series on Music Ed Now, and this exact PowerPoint will be available to download there. So hit subscribe now so that you're aware of when that video goes live. For the next tip, we're going to stay in the same presentation. This time I'm going to click on chords, and now you know how all of those animations are working. If I go over to basic, again, I've got another click animation to bring me on to basic chords. And now if I click on any one of these chords, what's going to happen is it's going to bring me to a new slide with the shape of the chord and where to put your fingers on the image up here. And then also on the guitar neck itself, just to show where the notes are placed. You'll also have noticed that there is now a camera appearing here. And what I have is just my iPhone set up on a stand here and pointing to where the left hand of my guitar would be. Again, I'm thinking of in-class use here. If there are 25 people in the room and there's some people in the very back of the room and that kind of thing, it can be hard to see up close to my hands. The people in the front row are probably able to see my hand in real time, but for those down the back, it can be helpful to have this camera set up so that they can look at the screen, and obviously the screen is bigger, so it zooms in. And that is what this tip is all about, is how do we get the camera to do what it's doing here. So what I'm going to do is again come into edit mode, and just to say the camera can be lots of different shapes and sizes, and you can have it take up half the slideshow if you want. So there's lots of, in the camera format itself, there's lots of options there, so you can change the camera shape to anything there that's already built into PowerPoint. You can put a border around it, and I've done the orange border here. You can also put a shadow, which I've put a shadow just to make it come off the page a little bit. And how you do this is very simple. You press the insert button and you go to the cameo option. As soon as you do that, a little circle will appear and you have a drop down menu, and you can choose whichever camera you want. You can choose your built-in camera if you want. In this case, I'm using my iPhone, and in the Mac ecosystem, your iPhone links really easily to your laptop. In this case, I'm working off a MacBook Air. Up the top here, you see the green camera icon. If I drop that down, you actually have a whole host of options here. I can zoom in more if I want. So again, if I want to make my hand, keep an eye on the slide there, if I want to make my hand more visible, so just have the iPhone on a stand here, then that way it's easier to view. So I can zoom in as much as I want there. So that's quite big. I can press on studio light like that, so it just looks a bit better. And then portrait, what that's doing is blurring the background there. So there's a bed over behind me here that I don't necessarily want the students to be focusing in on, or you guys to be focusing in on. So if I want to get rid of that, I can just blur that a little bit with this portrait mode. And then in the background mode, you can actually put a colored background on. So if I wanted nothing to be in the background, now it's a little bit glitchy. You'll see there as I move my hand around, it's trying to track it as best as possible. So that's a bit of a hit and miss one. Center stage is for when you want it to be on your face. So I'm not going to press that now, but basically as you move your head around, it will track with you. So it's using some sort of artificial intelligence there to keep tracking with your face. And that's just a really handy way of linking up your iPhone with your MacBook and then integrating into PowerPoint. Again, in slideshow mode then, you're going to have this. So we're on to the last two tips now, and the next one is quite a simple one. It's just inserting a live recording or an immediate recording into your slideshow presentation. So what we're going to do is go into Insert, we're going to go to Audio, and then instead of going from Audio Browser or Audio from a file, we're going to go to Record Audio. Then when you click to start, you can just play in whatever you want. So again, I'm in this guitar presentation, so I'll do something on guitar, but let's say I wanted to put in a chord progression. And then you can preview it back. Then click insert when you're happy enough. It pops up here in the slide. And then we can have the various controls that you would have in any audio file. So if I go to the format, I can change how that looks on the page. I can change how the playback is happening. So things like trimming. So I was speaking at the start there, and I would likely want to get rid of that. So wait until it gets over to the guitar starting. So that's just a really easy way of using the record audio function in PowerPoint. The other thing you can do is if you come over to your sound settings and you change the input mode from whatever you're currently on. So my mic is currently hooked up to a Zoom LA driver. So if you change that to this thing called Black Hole 2 channel, this is a virtual input and you can download that free for Mac. But if you wanted a Windows version, there's also different options out there. But basically you can use a virtual recorder to record something playing in your system sound. So if you had YouTube open or something that you wanted to use that was different media and you wanted to record that sound in directly, you can change your sound settings. So you go to the settings and you go to sound, and then on input just change it to this, and then you can actually record in system audio. So if you had, like I say, anything open in your browser, you can record that exact sound in directly. So that might be a time saver if you're a music teacher, for instance, and you're trying to look for different clips of audio. Nice simple one there. And that leaves us with the very last tip, which is about trigger animations. For this one, I actually don't have anything prepared, so I'm going to build this right now from scratch. We're going to duplicate this first slide and delete everything that isn't the guitar. Select on the guitar, and while it's selected, go to the animations tab, and let's do spin. And then what we're going to do is insert a text box. And then what we're going to do is go to our animations pane. With the animation selected, we're going to go to the trigger button on the click of, and I've renamed in the selection pane this spin the guitar text box to spin the guitar button. If I press that now, in slideshow mode, pressing this here will spin the guitar. And let's say that you wanted the guitar to stop spinning and keep its whatever rotation it's at when you click the spin again. What you do then is click the guitar again, and now we're going to add an appear animation, and there's the appear animation there. Also put that underneath the trigger spin the animation button by just pressing the down arrow. And just make sure that the appear animation is after the 3D model animation, the spin one. So this appear, the green one, has to be after this one. We'll hit spin the guitar. And then if I hit appear, it will stop at different points. So you could set this up like a little game. Wherever the guitar points at is the chord that people have to play. So spin the guitar, stop it. In this case, you'd have to play D minor. Spin the guitar again, stop it. They'd have to play E minor, and so on. You can also affect things like the speed. So if we have it set to very fast, and then you do get a more random outcome. So that is the last tip, using different buttons on the screen to trigger a different animation. If you start thinking about how to use this, like I do from time to time, you'll come up with millions of use cases and ideas on how to implement this into the classroom. So there you have it, 6 useful PowerPoint tips for teachers. If you found this video useful and you'd like to support the channel, hitting the subscribe button is the most effective and cost-free way of doing that. This has been David Kennedy with Music Out Now, and I'll see you in the next video.